Welcome back to our channel, your premier destination for all the latest drama, twists, and unforgettable moments. Today is a fantastic day to dive deep into the scandalous and ever complicated lives of our favorite residents. Grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and let us unpack the explosive developments that are shaking the very foundations of high society. Today is shaping up to be yet another absolutely crazy and unpredictable day in the notoriously dramatic world of Fairmont Crest. The catalyst for this latest hurricane of interpersonal conflict stems from a single, seemingly innocuous slip of the tongue that has managed to set the entire estate on edge. In a moment of unguarded vulnerability, Danny accidentally referred to Bill using the highly charged word husband. This was not merely a grammatical error. It was a verbal manifestation of a decade of muscle memory and deeply ingrained psychological conditioning. For Danny, the word slipped out as a subconscious reversion to a time when she and Bill ruled their complex empire side by side, a testament to the enduring nature of their past bond. However, in the hypersensitive environment they currently inhabit, that single word echoed like a gunshot, instantly shattering any fragile peace that might have existed. The immediate fallout from this verbal misstep was entirely predictable, but nonetheless spectacular in its intensity. Haley, the current reigning wife, reacted with an absolute explosion of fury. Driven by a blinding wave of jealousy and a profound sense of territorial insecurity, she swiftly laid down the law, enacting a strict and uncompromising ban that forbade Danny from ever setting foot in Bill's room again. This draconian measure was not born out of a genuine desire to protect Bill's health or to maintain a peaceful environment. Rather, it was a desperate, frantic attempt by Haley to protect her own fragile emotional territory. By attempting to physically separate Danny and Bill, Haley inadvertently revealed the sheer, unadulterated magnitude of her own self-doubt to everyone watching. She understands, perhaps better than anyone else, that physical proximity between those two is a highly dangerous catalyst that could easily reignite old, unextinguished flames. However, in her frantic attempt to establish dominance and build an impenetrable fortress around her marriage, Haley completely miscalculated the psychological backlash of her aggressive decree. Bill is fundamentally not a man who responds well to being caged, dictated to, or managed, especially by a partner who is supposed to offer unwavering support. Haley's heavy-handed approach to banishing Danny did not have the intended effect of making Bill forget his extensive past. Instead, it served as a glaring, inescapable spotlight on Haley's inherently controlling nature. The sheer audacity of his current wife attempting to forcibly sever a connection that has defined a massive and significant portion of his adult life sparked a powerful, rebellious streak within him. Bill, ever the master tactician in both business and personal matters, immediately recognized the underlying weakness and fear in Haley's aggressive posturing. Instead of yielding to her unreasonable demands, Bill began to formulate a brilliant counter strategy, one that would not only firmly assert his own autonomy, but also subtly and devastatingly put Haley in her place. In a move that can only be described as a masterclass in psychological warfare, Bill proactively reached out to Danny with a highly specific, deeply significant, and entirely unexpected request. He did not ask her for a casual favor or a brief moment of her time to clear the air. Instead, he explicitly asked for her direct assistance in handling a crucial, high-stakes issue related to his work. This was a deliberate, calculated, an incredibly sharp decision. By bringing Danny directly back into the intimate fold of his professional life, Bill was actively and aggressively tearing down the very boundaries that Haley had just so desperately tried to erect. He was sending a clear, unequivocal, and public message that Danny's formidable intellect, her sharp strategic mind, and her intimate, unparalleled understanding of his complex business operations were vital assets he was simply not willing to discard just because his current wife felt threatened. But Bill did not stop at merely asking for behind the scenes advice or private consultation. He escalated the situation to a completely unprecedented level by formally requesting that Danny appear right by his side at an upcoming, highly exclusive private event. This event is not just a standard social gathering or a meaningless charity gala. It is a critical, monumental milestone involving the official signing of a massive long-term contract with one of his most valued and long-standing corporate partners. Asking his ex-wife to accompany him to such a monumental professional occasion is a statement of earth-shattering proportions. It is a public declaration of ultimate trust, a powerful visual representation of their enduring partnership, and a direct, unmitigated challenge to the current social and marital hierarchy of Fairmont Crest. By choosing Danny to stand beside him during a moment of profound professional triumph, Bill is effectively telling the entire world and, most importantly, Haley, that when the stakes are at their absolute highest, Danny is the only person he truly wants in his corner. To add even more volatile fuel to this rapidly expanding fire, Bill looked Danny directly in the eye and stated plainly that he wanted her to be the very first person to know about a highly important, impending decision he is about to make. This deeply personal revelation is perhaps the most devastating and humiliating blow to Haley's fragile position as his wife. In a traditional marriage, the spouse is universally understood to be the primary confidant, the ultimate sounding board, and absolutely the first to hear of any major life changes, business pivots, or personal revelations. By explicitly bypassing Haley and bestowing this sacred emotional privilege upon Danny, Bill is entirely stripping Haley of her emotional primacy in his life. He is openly acknowledging that, despite the legal documents and wedding rings that bind him to Haley, his most profound intellectual and emotional connection remains permanently tethered to Danny. This level of emotional exclusivity and deep-rooted trust is a precious currency that Haley simply cannot buy, demand, or force into existence, no matter how many tantrums she throws or bans she enforces. When the harsh reality of Bill's calculated actions began to fully sink in, Haley found herself spiraling into a state of absolute, unadulterated fury. However, the root of her blinding anger was far more complex and painful than simple, petty jealousy over a social invitation. What truly enraged Haley, what undoubtedly kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling, and consumed her every waking thought, was the undeniable, agonizing realization that Bill fundamentally trusts Danny far more than he trusts her. It is an incredibly bitter pill to swallow, acknowledging that the powerful man she married still heavily relies on the wise counsel, the steady presence, and the unwavering support of his ex-wife. Haley's explosive anger is a direct manifestation of her own pathetic impotence in the face of their monumental shared history. She can control who enters a hospital room, but she cannot control the architecture of Bill's mind or the deeply ingrained, unshakable loyalties of his heart. Despite the raging, violent storm of insecurity, betrayal, and anger brewing fiercely within her, Haley desperately tried to maintain a fragile facade of cool, unbothered indifference. She forced herself to act calm, to smile tightly through clenched teeth, and to pretend to the outside world that Bill's sudden reliance on Danny was nothing more than a trivial, meaningless annoyance that was beneath her notice. But this elaborate masquerade was incredibly exhausting and ultimately entirely futile. Haley is a smart woman, and she quickly and terrifyingly realized the absolute truth of the situation. Bill was intentionally, methodically placing Danny in a highly visible position of power and influence, that Haley had absolutely no ability to manage or control. Every single time she tried to aggressively tighten her grip on her husband, Bill slipped further through her desperate fingers, moving inevitably closer to the one woman who truly understood the darkest and brightest parts of his soul. On the other side of this intricate, high stakes chess match, Danny did not immediately jump at Bill's surprising offer with blind, naive enthusiasm. Her initial reaction was one of profound skepticism, careful analysis, and deep suspicion. She knows intimately how Bill's mind works. She knows it operates in mysterious, highly calculated, and often deeply manipulative ways. She rigorously questioned his true motives, wondering if this sudden, overwhelming desire for her presence was a genuine plea for her unmatched professional help, a moment of nostalgic yearning, or simply a strategic pawn move in his own petty domestic disputes with his new wife. Danny has been burned by the fires of Fairmont Crest before, and she is far too intelligent, seasoned, and fiercely independent to walk blindly into a volatile situation without fully understanding all the angles and potential fallout. However, as Danny carefully processed the vast implications of Bill's invitation, a brilliant, empowering realization washed over her. She recognized that regardless of Bill's primary underlying motivation, this unique offer presented her with the absolute perfect, unassailable counterattack against Haley's recent unprovoked hostility. Haley had arrogantly drawn first blood by aggressively banning Danny from Bill's room, attempting to assert a false dominance and publicly humiliate Danny. Accepting Bill's invitation to be his essential right-hand woman at a major corporate contract signing was the ultimate, undeniable checkmate. It was a golden, unmissable opportunity to elegantly and effortlessly reclaim her lost territory without ever having to raise her voice, throw a tantrum, or engage in the petty, undignified squabbles that define Haley's existence. Danny quickly realized that by simply standing next to Bill, looking effortlessly radiant, fiercely intelligent, and utterly competent, she could inflict far more lasting psychological damage on Haley than 1,000 angry, screaming words ever could. If Bill follows through with this master plan, and all current indications suggest he is entirely committed to doing so, Haley will find herself hopelessly trapped in a truly agonizing dilemma, a classic, inescapable catch, 2-2 with absolutely no favorable outcome. On one hand, she could choose to actively and aggressively intervene, throwing a massive public tantrum, demanding that Bill immediately rescind the invitation and attempting to physically or emotionally prevent him from seeing Danny. But doing so would instantly and permanently brand her as a hysterical, deeply insecure, and toxically controlling wife, firmly validating every single negative thought or doubt Bill might currently harbor about the viability of their marriage. On the other hand, she could choose the agonizing path of absolute silence, forcing herself to swallow her immense pride, bite her tongue, and pretend she simply doesn't care about the blatant disrespect. But this option is equally, if not more, torturous, as it requires her to stand helplessly on the sidelines and passively watch as Danny systematically and beautifully regains her massive influence and her rightful historical place at Bill's side. The sheer, unadulterated humiliation of this entire situation for Haley is exponentially compounded by the specific professional dynamics currently at play. Currently, Haley is not just Bill's wife. She also holds a formal position as a paralegal at his highly prestigious law firm. In her own mind, this close professional proximity should absolutely guarantee her the coveted role of his primary confidant, chief advisor, and essential assistant in all crucial business matters. Yet, when a monumental, potentially company-defining long-term contract with a legacy partner is officially on the line, Bill completely and utterly bypasses his own wife and dedicated employee, opting instead to bring in Danny. This is a glaring, neon lit public insult to Haley's professional competence, her intelligence, and her overall status in his life. It brilliantly highlights the vast, entirely unbridgeable chasm between a paralegal who simply happens to be a new wife and a formidable woman who possesses a deep, incredibly complex history of massive financial entanglement, shared family legacy, and a long term empire building marriage with the boss. From a purely strategic, cold blooded business standpoint, Bill's decision to bring Danny to the signing is actually fiercely logical, which only serves to make it infinitely more infuriating and painful for Haley to accept. The specific partner involved in this vital long-term contract is a longtime associate, someone who likely remembers and deeply respects the golden, unstoppable era when Bill and Danny operated as a singular, terrifyingly effective power couple. For legacy clients and old school traditional business partners, historical continuity, proven stability, and recognizable faces are paramount to maintaining trust. Seeing Danny, a woman who fundamentally represents the historical financial strength, the brilliant strategic mind, and the familial solidity of Bill's vast empire standing firmly by his side, provides a profound sense of reassurance and security that a new, relatively inexperienced, and emotionally volatile wife simply cannot offer. Danny speaks the intricate, nuanced language of high-stakes corporate negotiation fluently, effortlessly, drawing on years of shared history and mutual, hard-fought victories that Haley has only ever read about in dusty filing cabinets. As the date of this highly anticipated private event rapidly approaches, the atmosphere in the halls of Fairmont Crest has grown incredibly thick with palpable anticipation, whispered rumors, and barely suppressed toxic hostility. Every single interaction is heavily laced with dangerous subtext. Every fleeting glance is a carefully calculated measurement of the enemy's strength and resolve. One can only begin to imagine the frantic, desperate preparations occurring behind the closed, locked doors of the estate. Haley is undoubtedly stewing in a highly toxic, corrosive mixture of impending dread and helpless rage, desperately trying to figure out a miraculous way to sabotage the evening without leaving her undeniable fingerprints all over the resulting wreckage. Meanwhile, Danny is likely preparing with the cool, methodical, and terrifying precision of a seasoned general preparing for a massive, decisive, and history-altering battle. She knows intimately that her appearance at this event is not just about securing a lucrative business contract. It is a profound, undeniable statement of her enduring relevance, a spectacular display of her immense power, and a brutal reminder of who truly holds the keys to Bill's legacy. The stage is now perfectly set for a confrontation of truly epic, mythological proportions, one that will not be fought with raised voices or thrown objects, but with incredibly subtle power plays, whispered secrets, stunning fashion choices, and the undeniable, crushing weight of shared history. Bill has inadvertently, or perhaps very, very intentionally, lit a slow burning fuse that is rapidly and inevitably burning toward a massive relationship shattering explosion. By choosing to publicly elevate Danny and brutally sideline Haley at such a crucial, highly visible juncture, he has forced a massive reckoning that will forever alter the delicate power dynamics of their deeply intertwined lives.